Hey everyone, it's Stephanie Garcia, and this is the Art of Becoming series, where we talk all about the journey between where you are right now and where you want to be, and all the stuff that has to happen in between to get you there. If you're ready, let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. It's Stephanie Garcia. I have a question for you. Have you ever just wanted to cut loose and do something, but then something holds you back and you feel yourself kind of contracting and stopping yourself before you express it or before you on the idea that you have? Well, today on the podcast, I have someone that I feel like really embodies the question of what would happen if, right? What would happen if you did that thing you were scared to do? What would happen if you just said the thing you wanted to say? Her name is Noel Elie, and she is an actress and teaches embodiment and shadow work. And I am so excited to talk to her because I feel like all of her work embodies that. And we could take a lot of lessons from her. So without further ado, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm glad to have you here.
Excited to be here.
Thank you. Because I feel like just this conversation needs to be had. I think women have a hard time just expressing themselves, but I think just as human beings, we all have a hard time kind of expressing ourselves fully and completely because there's that part of us that wants to hold back out of safety. Can you talk a little bit about where you are right now? Because from what I understand, like that's not how you were before, just a few years ago.
Well, I'm currently living in LA. I am single. I just had my 40th birthday. I'm a very different person even than who I was a year ago. And I don't know if it's the Sagittarius in me, if it's my human design. Those of you that know about human design, I'm a 1-3 manifesting generator. And so basically I'm constantly transforming. I was talking to my ex-husband the other day and I was saying to him, joking with him, like, you were married in 18 years that we were together, you were married to like 30 different women. And I realized I moved when I was young. I moved like between 28 and 30 times. And so I went to as a family, we moved a lot and I went to so many different schools. And so every time I showed up at a new school, I was kind of able to be this new version of myself. And so I realized that I kind of adopted that throughout the years of constantly just trying to expand and ascend. And I grew up in the South. And so I was very much the good girl, pleasing Southern belle. We always had a smile on our face. And no matter what was going on, everything was fine. And I was happy and it's all good. And who I am today is just the same, but also I generally tend towards happiness. But also, I am very much more raw and real and authentic with where I'm at. So if someone says, how are you today? And I was struggling, because I'm mindful of the words I use, instead of saying I am struggling, I'll feel into my body and go, well, in this moment, I feel good, or whatever it is. But it took a little bit of practice to get to where I am today, which is just like fully embodying the fullest essence of my soul and trying to show other people that it's safe to do that for them as well.
What do you think holds people back from that expression?
Fear. It's always fear. Fear of judgment. What are people going to think? What are people going to say? What are they going to do? Are they not going to like me? Are they going to be mean to me? Are they going to make fun of me? Usually it's some form of fear. Oftentimes it's helpful when we get permission from other people. And so sometimes it's just like the permission of, hey, you can do this thing. Like I'm doing it and I'm good. You can do it too. And then they're like, okay,
I don't know if it necessarily is permission that we're looking for, but more like that safety. And sometimes safety in numbers. If you're okay with it, okay, then I can step forward and be safe as well. So what you said that you're different from a year ago. How were you a year ago?
Well, and just to clarify, I agree with you. It's not that we need it. It's that there's a comfortability, there's a safety, what you're saying. There's an acceptance of, okay, well, if they've walked this path and they survived, then I can do it. And so it's exactly what you're saying. It's like a community of, hey, I'm still going to love you even in your shadow. So it's okay. You could bring your shadow.
Yeah, exactly. I like what you're saying. Like, if you've done it, I could do it too. There's a bit of that expansion. But then again, there's also that safety that it's been done before. You're like, okay, so there's not snakes in the water. At least I'm seeing this.
Yeah. Exactly.
You said you weren't, you're not the same person you were a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, a year ago, I was newly divorced and I had just kind of recently, last November, really started to reclaim my um, sacred sensuality and sexuality and really started to blossom into the woman I am today. If people follow me on social media, I will sing to the camera, I will dance to the camera, I will do all sorts of stuff that like I wouldn't have done a year ago, or I would have been scared, or it would have been a contraction. And now it's funny. I was talking to an ex-boyfriend and he was asking about my birthday. And I did like a little dance for my friends that were at my birthday party. And he was like, well, that wasn't a big deal. And I'm like, oh no, it actually was a huge deal because in the past, no way. You could have paid me to dance for people. And he said, but you do it all the time on Instagram. And I was like, yeah, it's different when you have a camera and no one's behind the camera. I mean, there's a lot of people, but like in that moment. And so just that in and of itself is huge for me. And so one of the things that's really helped me get there is the cringe. I like to say the cringe is in. And so what I mean by that is, especially in the beginning, still now sometimes, but especially in the beginning, if I would dance or sing or do something in front of the camera, I would cringe. So even though it may look like I was like fully embodied and expressive, and that was true, I would also immediately go, oh my God, what have I done? What have I done? And I would cringe, cringe, cringe. And all of a sudden, the more I leaned into the cringe, the more it became easy to do the scary thing in life. And so it's not that, I don't feel cringe now. It's just, it becomes easier.
It's like you're getting to your edge. You keep coming against that edge of what you've done before or what you've allowed yourself to do before, or that space of feeling safe. I think this is like a deeper conversation about to unfold here. Because one of the things that really struck me about your Instagram is this feeling of just, like, if you want to sing, you sing. If you want to do an embodiment practice, you do that embodiment practice. It's like what wants to come out of you right now, you just express it. And I think everybody, when I said earlier at the beginning of this, I said, I think women don't let ourselves do that so much. But I think it's a human thing. It's this idea of this is who I am and how far can I stretch it? How far can I go with it? How far is it safe to show who I am? And even the bigger question is just asking yourself, who are you? Like, who are you really? And sometimes that changes. Today I'm this, tomorrow I might be something else, but giving yourself permission to even just go there for yourself. So where did you start to get I know you said that when you were younger, you had the practice of showing yourself in different ways and kind of starting over. But from what I understand, you said on the phone when we first spoke that like 2 or 3 years ago, you were not doing this at all. So what caused you to want to do? Did you have a desire to want to express yourself fully and say, I don't give a hell what anybody says? And how long did it take for you to actually let
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I started to transform in this way, really leaning into authenticity in a deeper, greater way through acting, but also when my mom passed away. So she passed 8 years ago and she was my best friend and we spoke multiple times a day on the phone. And when she passed, that was my biggest fear, was losing her. And then it happened. And what would start to happen as a result is I would show up to places and it was deep grief. It was the most traumatic thing at the time that had happened to me. I would show up and friends of mine would be like, hey, and normally I would be happy-go-lucky, life of the party, whatever. And I couldn't. I just, if I was anything other than where I was at, I felt so gross afterward, almost like I needed a shower because it was like, what am I doing? And so I started to just show up. And when people would say, how are you? I'd say, I'm grieving. I'm in the most pain I've ever felt in my life. And some friends had a hard time with it. And I can remember one in particular saying to me, like, you've changed. And I was like, of course I've changed. What do you like? Yeah. And it was like I can't go back. And so that was like the first sort of major breadcrumb. And then the second piece was I got really sick. I had Lyme disease, I had mold toxicity, I had over 10 fibroid tumors in my uterus. I was basically bedridden, and it forced me to slow down and pause and start really uncovering these different layers to myself to really figure out who I was. And then I had healed most of that naturally. And then I had surgery to remove 8 tumors because I healed the rest naturally. And after the surgery, I separated from my husband. And then we got a divorce. Through me, I mean, that was my greatest heartbreak, like my biggest heartbreak. It was 18 years with, at the time, the love of my life. And who was I without him? It was the two of us for almost 20 years. And so it was real messy. It was not our finer moments. There's a Taylor Swift song. She says, I didn't have it in me to go with grace. And I'm like, yep, that was my relate to T Swift. And so as a result of that, there was a lot of messiness, and it was not our finer moments. And I like to say I walked the path of the Magdalene. So anyone that knows about Mary Magdalene, you've probably heard, at least for me, growing up in the South, Southern Christian, she was a hoe and she was crazy. And so similarly, my name kind of got tarnished after I got a divorce. People were saying I lost my mind and I was running off and doing this and that. And so essentially my ego got completely shattered. And I had an ego death of who am I if I'm not with my husband? Who am I if people are saying these things about me that aren't true? But I feel so misunderstood. And that's when sort of this light bulb moment went off. Oh, they're saying I'm crazy? Great. Let me show you how crazy I can be. Well, you're saying I'm wild and twirling in dresses? Let me show you how wild I can be. And so that's when I really started to dig deeply into my own shadow and shine light on my shadow and see these parts of myself that were beautiful and really letting them play in the light. And so through all of that, it just gave me this total sense of liberation of, well, people are saying it. I feel misunderstood. I can't do anything about it. So let me just lean into that, because I think we're all no one's really normal, but some of us are better at hiding certain aspects of ourselves. And who am I if I no longer hide? And so that's really what birthed this sort of audacious, wild woman. And it's so much more fun to go through life caring less in that way. And so this year in particular, my word of the year was pleasure. And so what that means to me is, how can I bring pleasure to everything I do? And what does pleasure look like? Right? A lot of times we hear it and we think oh, it's sexual or it's this. It's no, let me drink my coffee and have a ritual. This brings me pleasure every morning. Let me, put rose petals in my bathtub when I take a bath. That brings me pleasure. And so I've really spent this year doing the things that bring me pleasure in a constructive way. And it's also created this sense of liberation, because if it's not bringing me pleasure, I don't want to do it. And that's okay.
Exactly. I think there was so much to unpack there.
Yeah. Long-winded.
Okay, so I think for anybody who's listening who's never heard the term shadow, I think we should step back and explain a little bit about what that is. So from where I have had the experience, it's any place that you are sometimes afraid to show. Sometimes it's the messier parts of being human that, again, we sometimes are afraid to show. Sometimes it is that ego death where we are just, people are saying all sorts of stuff about us that we maybe don't want to be seen as, right? And the real question at that point is why? Why would you not want to be seen that way? Why would you not want to be affiliated with that, whatever term somebody's coming up with? Those are all the things. It's the parts of us that we're afraid to kind of lean into. There's the lighter sides of ourselves, and then there's the darker sides of ourselves, right? They are the part of us how we want to show ourselves. And then there's the very human parts of us. Those are all the parts that sit in the shadow. And sometimes when we want to be seen a certain way, it can be hard to embrace another way of being seen. And then when people are saying things like you went through, where people were saying so many things about you, you're like, that's not even fair. That's not even who I am. But sometimes we get so caught up in thinking about what somebody else is saying about us, and we care less about what we are thinking and saying about ourselves. So kudos for you to be dancing and playing at that.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think you described, the shadow really beautifully. It's like, it can be considered the ego. What's really helpful for me and a lot of my girlfriends. So I name my shadow. So I have many, many different, traits of my shadow, but as a whole, her name is Angelica, and she can be very entitled to all the things, and a princess, and very rebellious, and likes to get her way. And, she has these different parts to her. And it's the beauty of, like, a very simple way to start shadow work is to make a list of the quote unquote bad parts of us, right? If we all have good and bad, light and dark, whatever it is, like, make the bad traits list, and then also counter that. So, if I am selfish, well, if that's true in my shadow, what's true in my light? Oh, I'm extremely generous. If I'm grumpy in my shadow, I'm also incredibly happy and joyful in the light. And so as we start to see these parts of ourselves, there's no reason to go into shame about it. It's just like, oh, I have this part of me. And so when that part of me is coming out, perhaps on people that it's not meant to, or in leaky, spiky ways, usually what I find is like, oh, there's a teaching, there's a lesson. This part of me is wanting to be seen, heard, held, expressed, witnessed. So let me just like do a little bit of parts work and check in with the grumpy shadow and say, hey, what's going on? What do you want to say to me? And oftentimes it's like, for me at least, it's a lot of young inner child-ish stuff. And she's like, you're not paying attention to me. Nobody likes me, or whatever it is. And then I get to have this like really sweet conversation. And then the energy moves and it doesn't leak out at other people or situations where it's not actually meant to.
Yeah. And speaking a little bit about inner child work, we all have to recognize that we are the child, still as adults, still that child, right? That part of us has never changed. We can be 8 or 80. In reality, we're still that same person. When a child gets angry and throws a tantrum, nobody necessarily shames that child for that, right? The beautiful thing about children is they can be laughing and playing and then angry and mad in the next moment, throwing a fit in another moment, being a princess, being a soldier, being whatever. And there's no shame to that. The issue that so many of us have, I think, in my opinion, is that we stop connecting to that version of ourselves. And we start shaming ourselves for having a personality, for having personality traits, for being more than just black and white in our personalities, but instead of embracing the many shades that we are as human beings. And I think part of what it seems like you're doing in your work is that you are embracing all of those parts of yourselves, or all the parts of you. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you can call it shadow, you can call it whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter the term. Just acknowledge the fact that you are multifaceted. And you're not always going to be happy and joyful every moment. Sometimes you are going to be grumpy, right? So many parts of yourself are there. You have to own and honor. But then even within your expression, like you're doing, Noelle, all the different parts of you that wants to be expressed. Does that make sense? So
beautiful.
Yeah. I think just honoring for anybody who, I think sometimes we just need to give airtime to ourselves a little bit more. So you said that you kind of went through a fire transformation. And I can relate to your story so much because my mom passed away as well. And then I remember making a promise to her that I would start showing myself as I authentically am. I'm not hiding it. And also over the last couple of years since she's passed, I've also had to ask myself the question of like, what does that even mean? What does that even look like? So tell me a little bit about your journey to figuring out what that looks like for you.
Yeah, so the three in human design is the martyr. And so I like to say we are experiential embodied learners. And so oftentimes what that means is we will take the hard route and realize after the fact, like, "Oh, that was painful," and then share with the world, like, hey, if you're trying to go, from A to D, you don't actually have to go A to Z to Y to P to get to D. You can just go A, B, C, D. And here's how. And so understanding that about myself, understanding that sometimes the lessons I kind of in the past would have to get slapped in the face with the lesson has been really helpful to give myself a little bit more compassion when things have blown up. But also it's like, can tell someone, don't touch the stove, it's hot. But there are certain people where it's like they don't understand until they've gotten burned. So that's like one part of it. But also it's a lot of experiential of like, I did it this way, it didn't work. Let me not do it this way again. And I'm constantly trying to grow through what I go through.
Yeah.
The opportunity that I'm such a student of life. I'm such a seeker of the mystery, and knowing, the more I learn, the more I realize the less I know. So truly in every opportunity, any time something goes a little awry, I take that as an opportunity to learn, because I would rather not continue to learn the same lesson in a different form. And I was talking to an ex-boyfriend, and he was asking me like, "Oh, have you been dating a lot?" And since we broke up, and I said no. And he was like, "What do you mean? I figured you would be." And I was like, "I've been healing my heart. Like, I've been taking the time to heal my heart." And he was like, "I don't believe that, but maybe that's why I messed up." And I was like, "Yeah, maybe, I don't know." But like for me, it's exactly what I just said. Like, I got to learn really valuable lessons with you. You activated very specific wounds. And I know for me, if I don't tend to those wounds, I'm just going to attract from that same place, but in a different form. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in like learning the lesson and moving forward. And so that's like really how I approach life. It helps me continue to feel free as a result.
Yeah. And that's so important. That's so important. That way the next step is clear,
Mhm.
not muddied or murky from
Right.
the past. So Noelle, it really sounds like over the last, number of years, you have really been working on being conscious of how you're expressing yourself in your words, in your actions, in your decisions, and also in your public identity. Let's talk a little bit more about the public identity, because I think we can do things privately, right? Talking to exes, with our family, but now like really putting it out there for the world to see. How is that? Now, I think for you being an actress, that may have been a little easier, maybe, I don't know. But
Yeah, it really started back when my mom got sick with cancer. I started to share a lot more. And then I saw the value of sharing the truth of what was going on in my life, because people would reach out and say, "Oh my God, thank you. My mom has cancer," whatever it is. And then I started doing the same thing with grief, where I would post videos saying like, "Hey guys, y'all just saw me on the red carpet, but this is me like snot nosed sobbing because I can't breathe because a song came on that reminded me of my mom." And so this is the totality of who I am. So it kind of like started with that, and then through the divorce, that was really, it's kind of twofold, because on one hand, I had so many people reaching out saying, "Thank you." Nobody talks about like, because I was angry, I was heartbroken, I was all the full spectrum of emotions. I had very big feelings and I shared them all. And similarly with the last guy I dated, I shared a lot. And so Was it easy? Sometimes. Was it to help people? Yes. Was there also an energy of, I want these exes to hurt? I want them to know how bad I'm hurting? Yes. And so at times the pendulum swung too far. And so I say all of that to say, like, I also messed up. Like, I didn't do it right. Sometimes I was angry at a situation that had happened. And so I was going to post a meme that might be a little spiky. And then when I would recognize that, okay, this wasn't 100% clean. Yes, I want to help people. There's a saying, don't believe your own innocence. Christy Salerno says that. I love it. And I love it so much because I'm constantly checking in. And one of the ways is like, if I post something and I'm feeling cringe, I'll sit with it and go, okay, why am I feeling this way? Well, I'm afraid of what people are going to say or whatever it is, right? And then I'll ask myself, I'll take it a step further. Was it clean? Was this 100% clean, or was there slight messaging in there? And if there's even 10%, I take it down. And it's hard because we can convince ourselves. Like there was a reel that I posted not long ago, and there was a lot of good intention behind it. Truly. But it was about 70%. And then there was 30% that was a little like jabby. And it was going viral. And so I could have let that continue, like, but it's going viral. And like I had so many women be like, thank you, all of these things. But I was like, I thought about the person it could be, or people it could be affecting. And I was like, I can't, no, Noelle. And so again, it's sort of like trial by error. And so is it easier because I'm an actress to feel so exposed? Maybe, but also maybe not. Like, because even though I'm extroverted, I can also be very introverted. And so it's just becoming easier to expose myself the more I do it. So in the beginning, no. Everything that I'm posting, I would have been horrified. Like some of the stuff is quite unhinged. But again, it's like, it's so much more fun. And it's like everybody wants to be free, right? And I followed like these societal rules for such a long time. And the rebel in me was like, that's boring. Let's break the rules. Okay.
Yeah, right. So we're going to get to that in a minute. Hold on. I think I wanted to talk about the fact that, okay, so we're talking a little bit more about shadow. Shadow is that part that can be pretty snarky and pretty shitty. And, wants to be cutting. There's a part of being authentic in that though. You're being completely authentic with how you're feeling. There's a line though. There's a line. If it's going to do no harm is where I feel. Like be authentic, be whoever you want to be. But if you're doing harm to yourself or harm to someone else, that's when you gotta consider stopping. Don't want to tell people what to do. But in a time where people can feel like they want to say anything in the name of freedom, if what you say in your version of freedom binds somebody else, is that a good thing?
Exactly. And it's really, it comes down to like your own values and your own moral compass. And it's, we can be really sneaky and justify our actions. And it's exactly what you're saying. I'm like, wait, do I feel good about this though? Do I actually, regardless of like, the thousands of women that it's helping, like if I know it's potentially hurting one person, does that feel good for me? No. Okay, take it down. Oh man, Well,
and then there's a line there because there's also the line of where is the line between what I want to express in helping people and me caring a little too much about what other people think. There's that little line there. And you really you've got to check that for yourself and where that line is. I think for me, it's like, if I know it's going to hurt somebody, that's when I stop. Or if I know the person it could hurt, that's when I'm going to stop. But how do you deal with the feelings of what other people will think when it comes to this place of just being free and breaking the rules?
Yeah. This is why I think community is so important. So important. I was reflecting on this the other day. I have the most incredible best friends, men and women, in my life. I mean, I'm so grateful. I feel so fortunate. I say to myself all the time, I'm the luckiest woman in the world because I have a community of men and women who are just such clean mirrors. There's no projection, there's no agenda, just clean mirrors. And so I will check in. If I've done self-inventory and I feel like I need a little bit more, like I can't make up my mind or whatever, I'll just ask for feedback from my brothers and sisters. And sometimes it's crunchy and I'm having to work through the crunchiness because I don't like what's being said. And I'm always so grateful. And I take it and run with it. I think of like a football player. Like I take the ball and just run. And so even if it's crunchy in my body and I'm like, ooh, they just called out this part of me that I didn't want to look at. I thought I was hiding and I can't hide. I'm always so grateful. And so I think community is really, really helpful. And what I've discovered is the more I bring my authentic vulnerability, good, bad, indifferent, any of it. I mean, and I've brought some crazy stuff to my friends. The more I do it, the more they trust me. And then what's really cool is the more I do it, the more they do it. And it just creates, because I know for me, anytime somebody reveals something like really deep and vulnerable, I lean in. If I feel like someone's wearing a mask or hiding or withholding, I actually kind of repels me. And so, of course, I'm going to be the change I wish to see in the world. So I'm constantly with discernment, right? Not everyone is entitled to the inner workings of our heart, but I'm constantly with the people I love and trust saying it all and saying, guys, I just did something crazy last night and I'm not proud, but are you still going to love me? And then I'll share the thing. And they're like, been there, or yep, done that, or wow, that's a lot, you know?
Yeah, well, it's intimacy, right? And intimacy is into me see.
Yeah.
But he gets that option or that right to see that much into you. But finding the community that you can be that clear with, that they can see, and you can share back and forth those vulnerabilities is really important. So when you start to lean, okay, so let's talk about the freedom of breaking the rules, breaking the societal rules. What rules did you feel like you bumped up against?
So as an actress, I have a lot of people in the industry that follow me on social media, right? Casting directors, producers, directors, investors, all the things. And so, in this industry, they'll tell you, you need to look a certain way. You need to appear a certain way. Don't tell them your age. You give them an age range. Don't tell them what ethnicity you are because you are ethnically ambiguous. And so there are certain rules that you're meant to follow that I followed for a long time. And I just, out of fear, wouldn't show these other sides to myself. And when I got sick, I had to stop acting for a little bit. I had no choice because I was so sick. That also freed me because I stopped following the rules. And, they would say, like, don't share that you're sick. You're not going to get cast or whatever it is. And it was like, well, I can't get cast right now. I'm in bed. I actually can't be on set. So, and there's so many people with chronic illness right now that I'm able to help by saying like, hey, these are the healing modalities I took to get to where I am. If you do the same, you'll be on the other side. And so it was almost like through my own trauma or, through certain things that happened, it allowed me to be like, well, I have I'm not in the industry right now, so it doesn't matter. So I'm just going to do the thing that I want to do anyway, that I wish I would have done from the beginning. And so, yeah, that was really helpful in helping me continue to lean into the truth of where I was at.
What was the result of leaning in? They told you what not to be. You leaned in and did it. What was the result of that?
Freedom.
Right. So what way? Because I think a lot of us are, when I say a lot of us, I'm just speaking just in general, but you can be afraid of what's on the other side, right? These people tell us not to do something and now we're going to lean in and do it. What's on the other side? We're afraid of what's on the other side. We're afraid of what the reaction and the response is going to be. They say, don't do this because of XYZ. You do it. What is the XYZ in reality? What ends up actually coming up?
You end up finding that it's not as scary or as bad or as you think it's going to be. Often, like, it's not necessarily about, what do they say? It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So like, it's, there is reason. I want to be mindful when I say this. It's understandable why it's scary, because truth be told, I definitely lost a lot of followers. Like, let's be clear. I lost certain people in the industry for sure. We're like, what? And I gained more of my people. It was like the more I came online in every sense of the word, the more I came online, the more my people who are actually aligned, who are actually supportive, who are like, yes, more that, thank you, the more they could then find me and show up. And so before I was very, with my Instagram, I was very curated. I went through the like hot girl summer bikini photos. Everything was very curated, cookie cutter. And I would have people that would watch my stuff, and you can feel the energy. You can feel when someone's like not into it or having ulterior motives. You can feel it. And so I didn't actually feel, even though I would get the quick hits of validation, I didn't feel supported. It felt vapid. And then when I started really showing up online in all the ways, yes, I lost certain people, but I lost those people who like weren't actually that interested to begin with, and gained, men and women who are like, yes, oh my gosh, whatever this is, thank you. I want to do this thing. This is me too. And so it created a closeness. And it's exactly what you're saying. I want intimacy in every relationship in my life. Because to me, yes, intimacy is into me. See, intimacy is truth. And so it's like, it's that or nothing. It's
Right.
bust. And so um it I would rather have people in my corner that are actually rooting for me than people in my corner who are wanting to take.
Yeah. It's like it creates, the more that you are authentically expressing what your heart and soul is calling you to do, the more resonance, the more connection with the right people. And I think people are afraid to lose, but what are you afraid of losing? Right. And you said you lost a lot of followers. You lost maybe casting directors and all these people who were following you, but maybe they weren't the right people anyway. So what you lost was something that you maybe you meant to lose that stuff. It was important because it sounded like you gained so much more.
Exactly. And what's really cool is like, even though I quote unquote lost, now like the amount of people that come to my Instagram, my page, it's millions versus before it was not that at all. And also through getting sick, one little thing, because I had mold toxicity, we found out that the home we were living in had toxic mold. We had to get rid of my ex-husband and I had to get rid of every single thing that we owned. Clothes, shoes, books, furniture, literally we walked into our new home with nothing. And having walked through that, and I was a woman who like, I had amazing stuff and I loved my stuff, my bags, my dresses, all the things. And when you're stripped away of everything and you walk through that and you survive, and not only do you survive, you thrive and you're stronger from it, it just shows you how resilient we all are. So it's like, yeah, I lost these people, but it's exactly what you're saying. But what I gained is far greater than the loss. And so if we can let go and jump, the net appears.
Yeah. And it's like,
Going to win.
hey, and it's like you're releasing the old identity, what you're afraid. I wonder if sometimes we're afraid of losing all that we've known, right? So some gatekeeper says, don't do this, don't do that. And you believe them because, you don't know any better, right? I don't want to lose this thing, this ambiguous thing that I don't even know what it is. I don't want to, whatever it is, I don't want to lose it.
Yeah.
But then when you walk through that fire and say, no, I'm actually going to go ahead and just share it. I'm actually just going to express it. That ambiguous thing, like you didn't even know what this thing is that you were afraid to lose, but now you know what you've gained from it. Right. So you started sharing about your story. Casting directors and everybody told you not to do those things. What else was the next level after that where you're just like, I just want to express more?
Well, it was a combination of a lot of things, but I found plant medicine. And I say, if you feel the call, you feel the call. If you don't feel the call, trust that. But if you feel the call, perhaps listen. And so for me, when I found plant medicine, I got to see all the ways I was living my life with blinders on. And I could see, but then plant medicine kind of took those blinders off, and all of a sudden I could see a whole lot more, including a whole lot more of my shadow, right? And for me, it's like, well, once I see it, I can't unsee it. Sure, I can put back on the blinders, but that's painful and also not as fun. Like, I want to see all the way around. And so that really showed me the ways I was still, even though I thought I was being authentic, there were still ways that I was hiding or I was wearing a mask. And yeah, it was just, plant medicine to me is shadow work. And so even though I was doing shadow work on the side as well, every time I sat with a medicine, they call ayahuasca grandmother. Anytime I sat with grandmother, she was a grandmother. And she was saying to me, Noelle, clean this up. You're getting triggered by this person. Well, there's a wound in you. There's a reason this person is a mirror for you. So how can you look at this and tend to it and move forward with grace? And so that was really helpful in allowing me to dive deep in the quote unquote darkness and just shed light on it and play in it and express from that place. Because it's just, I could say it till I'm blue in the face. Like, we all have these, we're multitudes of women, men and women. And so it's like, we all have these different parts of us. And why do we have to make them bad or wrong?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, again, there's always that line of what's too much. Sometimes just being authentic and telling yourself the truth and knowing what your truth is, whatever that means, is enough. Sometimes you don't have to share it. You know, sometimes you want to share it publicly. That's okay too. The authenticity is in whether you want to share it or not. It's just a matter of telling yourself the truth. When we're saying be authentic, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to share everything that you're talking about. Even if it's just dancing, you don't have to turn the camera on and show it to the world. You don't have to. Just dance for yourselves. What it is about allowing yourself to kind of move the walls and the container that you've been putting yourself in.
That's right.
Question the rules you've been following. Ask yourself, is that true for you? Who said it? Why did they say it? Do you even know who said it?
Right.
Following that rule, ask yourself these questions, not from a place of wanting to just break the rules to break the rules, though that's fun too, but just, is it true for you? And so my question for you is, how did that start to affect your work? Because you're an actress director, you've got a PR or production company, right? Has that made the jobs that you've gotten richer, better, more aligned, more connected?
Definitely more aligned, for sure. What's that?
In what way?
I never loved taking jobs for the money. Really, alignment has always been really important, but sometimes we do the thing for the money. And this has been, it's allowed my sacral authority, which in human design, I have sacral authority is gut instinct. It's allowed my gut instinct to strengthen. And so I can tell from the moment I meet someone, if they want to work with me, I can tell if it's a yes or no, just by my body. And so the more embodied in my own authenticity I've become, the more this gut instinct has strengthened. And so it's through my own compass. And then what starts to happen is the more I align to this energy, people who are not an energetic match don't match up. Like you feel it. And so they won't even come my way now. Or if they do, I'm so clear and so solid and so sovereign that it's just a no. And so that's been really cool to trust that, because it can also be scary, because it's like, but what about money? And what about this? It's like, no. It's something better will come. I need to free up the space and trust that what's coming is better as a result.
Yeah. There's so much there. You're not as exhausted. You don't realize you're drained when you are just pretending to be somebody you're not. and surrounded by people that are not the right people for you. You don't realize how much energy is leaked in. Now, when you're saying that your work is richer, is it your work is richer because you become more authentic in your day-to-day life, or is your how you are sharing yourself on Instagram resulted in more work that is more aligned? What do you feel like?
All of it.
But
Yeah, all of the above. Yeah. And one of the things you touched on, which I loved a little bit ago, was about, you know, yes, this is my path. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be everyone's path. Sometimes it's just really getting clear on what is the truth for myself. I had a conversation with someone where they didn't tell me the truth. And I said, like, why didn't you tell me the truth? And he said, because if I admitted the truth to you, I would have had to admit the truth to myself. And I couldn't do that. And I found that so beautiful that he had the awareness of that. And it's like that, it's exactly that. It's like when we just, without awareness, we can't change, we can't grow. And so sometimes it's just the like inner, exactly what you're saying. Like sometimes it's, okay, well, I was slut shamed for dancing at 15 years old. So I don't like to dance for people. So can I put the lights down low and dance in my room for 5 minutes? And then can that 5 minutes eventually turn into 10, turn into 15, turn into dancing at a club or whatever it is? And it's those subtle shifts that equal radical change. And for me, the dancing piece is really important because some of my best friends used to work for a company called S Factor, and it was embodiment, and it was pole dancing, and it was sensual. And I had taken some classes, loved it. And after my mom passed away, I was craving this sort of dance, and I judged myself for it because I was like, this is crazy. My mom died. Why do I want to move my body sensually? And I completely shamed myself for it, and I wouldn't allow myself to do it. And then the former owner, the founder, she posted a video online. And I think she had lost a family member or a friend to cancer. And she said, this is how I move grief through my body. And she danced, and it was so sensual and so beautiful and so heartfelt. And I watched this 3-minute video and sobbed. And instead of going out with my friends that night, I stayed in, I put on one song, and I allowed myself to move the way I wanted to move. And I was able to tap into such a deep sense of grief in losing my mom that there's no other way I would have been able to do it had it not been for that. And so for those of us that aren't afraid to be exposed, showing up online, sharing these bits can do massive amounts for people. Because had this woman not shared her video, I wouldn't have given myself permission to do the same. And so again, it's like that was 8 years ago. If you had said, film it, I would have said, you're crazy, no way. But now 8 years later, I'm doing it all the time. But it took baby steps to get there.
yeah, and I think that's a really important part to talk about, because being more of an authentic person, being more of who you authentically are, is a process. Because we have to first like understand, what does that even mean? What does it even look like? Some of us are so disconnected from our authenticity and living in what really matters. When we say truth, we're meaning like what matters to you. I always equate this whole thing of like, when I was younger, we would always go to the store and we would get, each one of us kids would get a candy bar or something like that. And I would just get the peanut M&Ms because my mom liked the peanut M&Ms. And I just thought that's what I liked. But as I got older, I realized I didn't like any of that candy. I liked very different, much.
Yeah.
But for a long time, I was thinking and living in a way that I thought was my truth, and seeing what really was my truth and lived more into that. When you can find what is the truth for you, your life opens up. It becomes richer. You become closer in your body, and you just feel connected more to yourself and to the world in a different way. But it's a process. So when you were talking about just letting yourself dance a little bit in your house, that's titrating, right? Your nervous system would freak out if you ran and just went and danced in a club. You would like be tight. or even the video. If you turn on your video and start dancing, you would never post it. But if you can give yourself the chance to just be with yourself, just little by little, see where it grows, see where it comes into. I think that's really important to talk about, is that being authentic, as easy as it sounds right now for you, Noelle, I'm sure there's a part of you that had to move slowly to get there.
Totally. 100%. And, earlier in the year, I was on a date, and we ended up at this like opening of a club, and he and I are not like club goers. I started dancing just in like the full radiant feminine-esque way that I was feeling. And he was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I said, what? And he's like, you can't dance like that. I was like, why? And he goes, because like they're looking. And I was like, who? And he goes, the people. And I was like, the people? What are the people going to say? What are the people going to do? Not the people. Able to kind of laugh at himself. And I was able to laugh too, and I had so much compassion for that, because truly, I can't emphasize it enough. That would have been me years ago. But I've worked so hard to break out of this old conditioning that didn't serve me, that was keeping me so weighted down, tied down. And now I really truly feel like a phoenix. And, with my ex-husband, we're dear friends now. And thank God, we've had many conversations about like, I wouldn't take any of it back, because who I am today, I love more than I've ever loved myself. And I had to walk through the fire. It had to all burn down for me to get to where I am. And I'm so grateful for it. And so, but it really was those tiny, tiny steps, and whatever my nervous system could handle at that time. And then the more I regulated, and the more I took care of myself, and the more I practiced self-love and compassion and understanding and forgiving myself when I do the shadowy bits that I'm not proud of, like really forgiving myself and looking at, well, why did I do that? Where was that coming from? Okay. Do I need to clean up my side of the street? Do I need to take accountability and apologize? Great. And now I can take action to do it differently. So those are all steps that have continued to help me to get to where I am.
I think it's also important to give yourself self-compassion in this process period.
Yeah.
You didn't know. And if you're looking back going, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done that, or oh, I've been following this for the longest time and it's not true. I'm like, just give yourself compassion. We all have grown up in some kind of conditioning. Remember, we go to school and we're told when to sit down, when to get up, what to do. It's been since our birth. We've been told how to be, who to be, what to be like in order to fit in with the other kids, to be the good kid in school, or if you weren't considered the good kid in school. It's a process, and the people you've grown up around, right? So it's a process to kind of unwind yourself and unravel yourself and rewild yourself and come back to who you authentically are. So Noelle, let's talk about this question, which is the whole reason I wanted you on the podcast, which is, what would happen if you would? So when I was talking to Autumn Reeser, she's on the other podcast right before yours, she was talking about, she loves how you would keep reminding her, what would happen if you would? So what do you think is what makes some people so scared about? Like, if you want to do something and somebody says, well, what happened if you did that? Why do you think people stop?
Because of that societal conditioning or religious programming, or, but what are my parents going to think? Or, it's that like, but is it okay? Is it okay? It's not okay. It can't be okay. Can it be okay? I don't know. I don't think so. And so it's these like fear-based thoughts that keep us enslaved. And so, I'll always say, okay, what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? If you do this thing, what is the worst that can happen? And oftentimes people walk through it, they'll share, well, this. And then I'm able to reflect back another time in their life where something kind of similar maybe happened and they got through it and they're fine. And so it's almost like just reminding people of their own strength and their own resilience to like, for the worst thing that could happen, if it happened, could that equal freedom? Could that actually equal liberation? And yeah, so I don't know. I mean, does that make sense? Is that helpful?
I think also the fear, it's so interesting because let's say you want to record a podcast or you want to post your very first video on, for example, social media. It doesn't really matter. It's that moment right before you hit record, where for some reason it feels like death. It feels like you're coming up against the edge of a cliff and you're about to jump off and you don't know if you're going to have a parachute. You don't know if you're going to be okay. It's a visceral reaction. And I've always wondered, like, what is that fear? Because in that moment, you're not thinking about what could you gain. You're thinking about doing this thing that is stretching you past your point. And you say leaning into the cringe, leaning into that feeling. Is that what you're talking about? It's that moment before you hit record, before you post it, where you're just like so scared. Is that?
Well, look, if they say if it's hysterical, so sometimes there's a lot of people in my life right now where they're really edging up against the truth. There's certain truths that are wanting to be spoken and they don't want to speak the truth. And I've said to them like, oh my God, I get it. I can remember there were years ago, there were truths that I needed to share, that I wanted to share, but it was so terrifying. I felt physically like I was going to die. The more I leaned into it, the more I practiced showing up, even if it was a micro truth, even if it wasn't the totality of the truth, that little bit was like a breadcrumb, and I was able to get more slices of the pie and all of a sudden have a much larger pie. And so it's like, it's giving yourself permission to feel like you're going to die. And so sometimes it's as simple as putting your hand on your heart, on your womb, and going, okay, let's feel this. Let's feel this. What does this feel like? Oh my God, I'm going to die. Okay, let's lean into that. And then literally playing in that, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Oh my God, I'm going to die. Right. And like, just even if it's for a couple minutes, I know it feels like we're going to die. Are we going to die? Maybe. I don't think so. But if we do, what's after that? Like, and just play to where all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay. Like sometimes I'll do that with, I have niece and nephews and they'll be crying over something and I'll let them have their experience. But if it continues on, I'll be like, hey, and I'll play with them crying and we'll bring in laughter and levity. And all of a sudden they have forgotten about the thing that they were so upset about. And they're like, do. And so it's that sort of tactic that I use on myself and with the people in my life, to where the scary thing all of a sudden is like silly.
Yeah, you have to let yourself feel it. So I think the problem sometimes is we make it be a bad thing. There's been times where I've wanted to record something or do something and the nerves get the better of me. And I have to remind myself, stop fighting that. You're feeling, just acknowledge it. And just like you were saying, we're just making it kind of light and airy a little bit. I took a class where we had to take that and just stretch it and characterize it in the wildest way, to the point where you just felt like, yeah, it was so silly when you really think about it. And it's almost like you're using your imagination in the wrong way. We have wonderful imaginations, and sometimes we use it in the wrong way.
Yeah. And it often it requires a level of vulnerability, right? So like, if I'm scared to do the thing and I feel like I'm going to die, if I go to someone and I say, hey, can I out something to you? Like, can you hold space for me for a second? I feel like I'm going to die. There's such a level of safety that we is often required to have with people in our lives to lean into that vulnerability. And so when we can be witnessed in the fear, it moves it, for me, it moves it so much more quickly than if I'm trying to do it on my own. And so it's also this remembrance, like, we don't have to do it by ourselves. We have people that love us, that want to support us. And often when people come to me and they ask me for help, I end up giving the advice that I need anyway. And so in them doing the vulnerable thing, asking me for help, not only is it helping them, it's helping me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's such a great point too, because shame, they say that shame, once it's shared, it just dissipates. Fear also does the same thing. It like really messes with you, but when you talk about it and you say, hey, listen, I'm frightened as hell right now, then other people can come and support you. But it also doesn't continue to live on very much. You can say, yeah, you're afraid, and I can continue to do this. I think it's also a little bit of maybe being nervous or vulnerable, or I don't know the word it is, about being seen in a new way, being seen in an authentic way. Sometimes being authentic requires you to show that in front of other people. And that can be scary and vulnerable too.
Well, sometimes people, even that love you, will use your vulnerabilities against you, right? So if somebody shares something with you and then, you guys are in an argument a couple days later and then you bring up the thing that they shared, that's like weaponizing our vulnerabilities. And sometimes it's not even intentional. It's just like what we grew up learning. And so it's knowing that sometimes we're going to get hurt. Sometimes we are going to get hurt when we share our vulnerabilities, but we'll survive and we'll be stronger for it. And the more you have the right people in your life, the less we're going to get hurt, because then you really get to discern again that thing of like, all right, here's my heart on the altar of love, but can this person hold it? No? Okay. Let me bring it to people that can hold it. And so that, because a lot of times, myself included, like I have people in my life where trust is like a really hard thing. So they'd rather just not trust. But then I can see all that they're missing out on. And so it's like, hey, maybe trust and know it might hurt, like you might not be met, but you'll survive, and then trust some more, and then trust some more.
Yeah. And just knowing the right people to trust.
Yeah.
Because especially when you're starting to separate yourself from the world that you were once living in, separating yourself from all those shoulds, from all those truths that are no longer yours. And now you're starting to express yourself from that place around people. Don't feel like you have to do that with every person.
That's right.
Feel into where you feel like you're going to be legitimately safe to express yourself. Because the last thing you want is to bump up, and you can't always help it. Sometimes you are going to bump up against somebody, and it is going to make you want to kind of shrink back. Be careful a little bit with yourself. Share it with whoever you feel like you're comfortable until you get to the point where you don't care as much to just share your truth. And that day will come, right?
I mean, even the other day, there was someone in my life that like I'm not that close with, and I don't know that I necessarily like desire a super close relationship with this person, but they were feeling a certain way about something. And I found myself voice memoing them this long sort of explanation, all these details. And then I sat with it and I was like, wait, that was like people pleasing. And I don't actually want them to have all of that information. So I said to myself, normalize unsending the voice memo. So I just unsent it. And I sent a new one that was much more short. That was the truth, whatever. And it was like, oh, right. I'm conditioned to think like, well, I sent it. And if I unsend it, they're going to feel a certain way. No, like what would be the most loving thing for me? I need to unsend this. This doesn't feel good. So I unsent it.
Yeah. 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 And just it's another using your imagination in the right way. As in, we can imagine 1,500 things that we think could happen as a result of doing that. But probably the vast majority of them will never happen. I think, again, when we're afraid of doing something or what somebody else is going to say or what somebody else is going to do, again, it's our imagination going in the wrong direction. And the reality, if you just kind of lean in and move through it, you might find that none of it happens. And something even better than you could imagine could happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. And it's, what's funny when I started sharing about the mold stuff online and the sickness stuff, and I was afraid how it was going to affect my acting career. A producer called me maybe a couple months after I had done a podcast episode and called me and said, we would love for you to be the lead on this show. We listened to your podcast. And for me, it wasn't the right fit. Like I turned it down, but it was so cool because I was showing up in the fullness of where I was at. And again, it was attracting the right people. And so sometimes in that, like, if your discernment meter isn't totally honed in, sometimes it is like oversharing, but then also learning like, okay, I just overshared this. That doesn't feel good. Let me not do it in the future. And sometimes oversharing can still bring you the right people. So it's like knowing that all roads lead to Rome at the end of the day.
Nothing's wasted. Nothing's wasted. And I think the moment, like, for example, let's say you want to record something and those few moments before you hit record, you don't have to share it, but expressing it just for yourself. But also, if you do decide to share it and you're afraid of what other people are going to think because you're afraid to be seen as this way, I think Noelle's story right there is perfect. Sometimes you're afraid to be seen in this new way. But what if that's the first time you're actually being authentically seen? How many times seen in a way that is not authentically you? And sometimes there's a fear of being seen in this new way, this true, authentic way. And what if it leads to a lot of amazing things because the right people can finally see you? Think about it then.
It's so true. That's so beautiful. It's also like there's so many times, by the way, where like I'll post something and then I'll literally get on and go, oh my God, y'all, that's so cringe. I'm like, I want to take it down. I might take it down. I don't know, but oh well. Like, and just also throw that in there, you know? And what that's helped me do is when I need to have certain conversations with people in real life, starting out the conversation, I need to talk to you about this thing. I'm really scared. You're going to be so mad at me, but I'm going to share. Are you open to hearing or whatever it is? And it makes it so much easier.
Yeah. Just talk about it. Talk about the fact that you feel so scared. Sometimes it helps, again, to just out it and open it and say it. There's been so many times that I've just expressed how I was feeling in that moment. And it has been met with so much support, whether it's a friend or just somebody I've worked with on different project, doesn't really matter. It's that human to human connection. If you just say, listen, I mean, who do you help anyway by trying to pretend that you have got it all together? I think sometimes it helps more people to show when you just don't.
With my production PR company, I've worked with a lot of amazing public figures, and I've seen behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And through seeing behind the curtain, it's showed me, wow, these people are spectacular. They know so much and they know nothing. They are so put together and they are a mess. And it is all beautiful. So it's like anybody that I ever thought like, well, okay, I then discover like, oh, they're still figuring it out too. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, we are all in this together.
It just makes you feel better.
Yeah, less alone.
Yeah, less alone. Yeah, it is. We are all in this together, right? Thank you so much for doing this interview. Let everybody know where they can follow you.
Yeah, so Instagram is my jam at Noelle_Elie. And I have noellelie.com and noelleelieproductions.com. I'm starting to get a little more active on TikTok. I haven't totally figured it out yet. But Instagram, I would love to connect with you there for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was so special.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you'd like, share this episode with a friend. That way we can get it into the ears of people who need it the most. You can also visit my website at theartofbecoming.me. While there, you can go ahead and download my guide, Own That Shit. 3 ways to own who you are, own what you do, and own it out into the world. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.